The major reason Tinubu and all the advocates of petroleum subsidy removal gave to Nigerians, including foreign financial institutions like IMF, World Bank and others, the reason they gave Nigerians to justify subsidy removal was the fact that Nigeria was wasting enormous revenue paying for subsidy. That instead, Nigeria should invest that money in critical areas like health, education and other critical infrastructure. Many swallowed it hook, line and sinker at the time. In fact, many still insist that subsidy removal is the right thing to do in Nigeria. Okay, it looks good on paper, but it defies logic that Tinubu, who is not paying petroleum subsidy, has borrowed more money than Muhammadu Buhari, who paid petroleum subsidy throughout his 8 years in power. So why is Nigeria borrowing so much money despite not paying for petroleum subsidy? Despite Tinubu promising Nigerians that the money will be invested in other critical infrastructure, but Nigerians don't really see where they are investing the money, and on top of that, they are borrowing more money. As at now, he has borrowed about 70% of Nigeria's GDP. This is an all-time high in Nigeria's history. This is despite the fact that Tinubu printed more than 10 trillion naira in his first year in office. Add that to the more than 25 trillion naira that Muhammadu Buhari printed, going by the exchange rate at the time, is equivalent to $50 billion. Now, he has taken it to another level completely. Peter Obi has reacted to this. In a scathing reprimand of the Tinubu administration, he said, on July 22, 2025, the Nigerian Senate approved an additional $21 billion, 2.2 billion euros, 15 billion yen of external borrowing for the 2025-2026 fiscal cycle. It also approved a 750 billion naira domestic bond issuance and a 65.65 million euro grant. With an already existing public debt of about 149.39 trillion naira as at the first quarter of 2025, adding the approved loans of about 37.2 trillion naira, brings our current total debt to about 187 trillion naira, with concerns that our debt might likely be over 200 trillion naira by the end of 2025. As our GDP before rebasing was about 269.2 trillion naira, about $180 billion, the government has borrowed the equivalent of nearly 70% of our previous GDP, even after the rebasing, which pushed our GDP to about 372.8 trillion naira, about $243.7 billion. The government would have borrowed about 50.16% of the new GDP. With the approved loans, the highest debt to GDP ratio in our history as a nation. While the year-on-year increase is about 27.72 trillion naira, and the quarter-on-quarter increase is about 4.72 trillion naira, we are accumulating very exponential levels of unsustainable debt with little or nothing to show for it in critical areas such as education, healthcare, electricity generation, security of lives and property, and pulling people out of poverty. We still rank low in all major human development indicators, while education is underfunded and standard in continuous decline. Healthcare remains inaccessible to millions of Nigerians, particularly the poor. Security of lives and property has deteriorated with over 10,217 people killed and 672 villages sacked between May 29, 2023 and May 29, 2025. Even when security spending has significantly increased from 2.98 trillion naira in 2023 to 4.91 trillion naira in 2025. Infrastructure decay persists across the country, with about 135,000 kilometers of our 195,000 kilometers of roads remaining unpaved, largely unmotorable and unusable. It is the same depressing situation in almost all sectors of the economy, with the power sector an unquestionable example, with less than 5,000 megawatts supplied for over 200 million Nigerians. Today, over 2 years after the present government took over, and with all the humongous borrowing, we are still confronted with negative reports of worsening poverty, with about 133 million Nigerians, that's 63%, classified as multidimensionally poor, increasing unemployment and disheartening news like 652 children dead as the malnutrition crisis worsens in northern Nigeria. Medicines Sans Frontiers, MSF, also known as Doctors Without Borders, has just sounded the alarm over an escalating malnutrition crisis in northern Nigeria, with Katsina State emerging as one of the worst hit areas. This is a country blessed with enormous resources, yet nobody should go to bed hungry. Still, a persistent deficiency in leadership has thrown the majority of our citizens into increasing multidimensional poverty. Borrowing is not inherently bad if it is sustainable and tied to productive investments with measurable outcomes. Unfortunately, this current pattern of borrowing without accountability, without transparency, and without transformational impact is simply mortgaging the future of our children. The government should consider the intergenerational consequences of their unsustainable borrowings and show at least a minimum consideration and interest in future of young and unborn Nigerians. We must return to a disciplined and prudent economic management culture, cutting the cost of governance, blocking leakages, investing in human capital, and building a productive economy. Nigeria cannot continue to borrow recklessly while poverty deepens and public trust erodes. It is time to stop this fiscal indiscipline. We must build a new Nigeria where leadership is responsible, development is people-centered, and every kobo borrowed or spent delivers a measurable impact to achieve sustainable and inclusive development and growth. If you're a patriotic Nigerian, you are not an accidental patriot who is loyal to individual instead of being loyal to your country, you must admit what Peter Obi said here. Where they are plunging Nigerians is not sustainable. That's the reality. Let's take a look at some of the borrowings under this administration. You will see how laughable what they are borrowing money for is. For example, they borrowed $500 million for women empowerment. How is this going to solve all the numerous problems we have in Nigeria? Where are the women that were empowered? Yes, the second one is $800 million for safety nets. You can call this one a sort of empowerment also. Safety net. Who are the people that were put in the safety net? Who were the people that were given loans? But $800 million gone like that. Another one is $750 million for power. Does it mean power supply? Was this money invested in power generation or transmission or distribution? Where did they invest the money? And the most important thing is, Nigerians are not feeling the impact. Also, electric power is expensive in Nigeria. Doing business in Nigeria, you pay more for power compared to someone in a Western country where they have access to other critical infrastructure like good roads, water, and many others. But in Nigeria, before you set up a factory, you are forced to construct the road. That depends on where you are building the factory. But in most cases, you have to construct the road leading to your factory so that delivery trucks will not fall on their way to deliver raw materials to your factory. Or maybe delivery trucks that are moving finished goods from the factory to the markets or the ports. Another one is $700 million was borrowed for girls' education. Who are the girls that benefited from this $700 million? There's another one, $225 million for rural agriculture. This one is a very important loan, but it's still not clear how they disbursed this loan or where they spent it. We need to improve our food production. We know how insecurity has been hurting our food production in this country. Many farmers in their thousands have lost their lives to insecurity, to terrorism, to local bandits. We need to deal with this. If we're able to deal with insecurity, many people will genuinely go back to their farms and start farming. All the government needs to do for them is to make sure they have the right implement, the right farm equipment. If they're able to have all this, and most importantly, roads in these rural communities, the major problem we have in agriculture is that most of the food perish before they even get to the market, largely because there are no roads to transport these crops and fruits to the market. Because if they have good road access to the market, immediately they harvest their produce, they will just move them to the market and make their sales. So these are the roads that the federal government should concentrate on to make sure that they are paved to improve the ease of doing business in Nigeria. Instead, Tinubu is concentrating on building the coastal road. It was even reported the other day that he is borrowing money to invest in construction of the coastal road. This is very strange. There are existing thousands of federal roads in Nigeria that if they pave all of them will improve the ease of doing business in Nigeria. But instead of doing all that, they are concentrating on an entirely new road to nowhere. So you can see they don't have their priorities right. These are coming from people who always tell Nigerians that Nigeria is nearly bankrupt, that there is not enough revenue to solve all the problems. But the little revenue they generate and the massive borrowings, they cannot prioritize the investment so as to give Nigerians better value for their money. Thanks for watching.